Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we're once again getting the hang of HyperScribe. And I'm going to start looking at some of the advanced options available to us in HyperScribe, and this will be part one. There's a bit to this, so we'll do this in a couple parts. And specifically, we're going to start looking at some of the beat source options from the HyperScribe menu. And let's start with playback and or click. Now we know that the beat sources is going to, refer to the count off and the click, and also where the tempo is coming from. All right, so we've been in this window before, right? And we know off the bat that the top half of this is going to relate to the tempo, right? And in fact, the first option we know is going to take the tempo from the playback controls. The second option will override those tempos using whatever you type in here, or if you press listen, you can tap your own tempo. And just as a reminder, remember that if you have expressions with tempo data in it, those expressions will override both of these options. All right, so just so you know the hierarchy of the tempos for HyperScribe. And of course, the beat equals, we know that we want to make that make sense for the meter, so quarter note for 4/4, but if you're in 6/8, you're going to want the dotted quarter note, obviously. And Finale provides us a EDU number here, and the EDU number will change as you select a different value here. And theoretically, you could actually enter a different number here. My advice to you is don't. I've tried this. I thought I would try and be clever and see if I could do like quarter note triplets in a 4/4 bar, just to see if I could hear that click. And unfortunately, EDUs don't divide evenly by 3. And when I tried it and tried to transcribe some triplets, it became a whole world of a mess. So the bottom line is, don't mess with this value here. Just use the beat equals rhythms from this section. All right. Now we do have some other start signal for recording options, and up until now we've been dealing with none. And essentially what that means is that when you click in a measure, it will start right away. It'll start the count off right away, right? But we do have some other options there. In fact, we have 5 other options. And if you choose any other options except the first one, HyperScribe is going to wait for you to trigger whatever it is you've chosen before it starts the recording. And so the second one here is any MIDI data. It doesn't matter what the MIDI data is, it's going to wait for something to happen before it starts recording. So now when I click in the measure, nothing happens until it's waiting for me to press any MIDI data, and it could be a note, and that will start the count off. It could be a sustain pedal, that'll start the count off. I mean, it could be even, I have a pitch bend on this keyboard here, and I just move the pitch bend and it starts. All right. So that's available to you as well. That's any MIDI data. And we have a couple other options here: standard sustain pedal and non-standard sustain pedal. Obviously, it's going to wait for the trigger from one of those two things. And if you're familiar with sustain pedals, you know this just has to do with the polarity of the particular sustain pedal that you have. And then there's an option here, current metronome sound. Now this will only work if you go into click and count off. You have a metronome sound section here, and currently it's set to, the source is set to finale click. If you have finale click set and you try to do current metronome sound as the start signal, nothing's going to happen because there's no way to trigger that particular finale click, right? If you choose MIDI note or MIDI data, then whatever it is that you assign for the metronome sound, when you play that particular note in that particular channel, for example, then that will be used to start the signal for recording. This is a very technical thing, and I'm not even sure of the practical purpose of using this, but that's what that would be, all right? And then finally, other, if you choose other, you'll get this little MIDI event window, and with these 3 technical boxes, which is hexadecimal MIDI values, if you're curious about that. And I'm going to quote right from the Finale manual, and I couldn't agree more. Quote, "Unless you're a MIDI programmer, ignore the codes." So there you go. But what you can do is you can actually choose listen, and Finale is going to wait for you to play or do something with your MIDI controller. So for example, I can play a very specific note on my keyboard. In fact, I'm going to play the top C on this 49 keyboard. And it just converted that to a MIDI event code here. And okay, so now I have that set as a start signal. Oops, yes, one more time. Thank you. Right, so now when I go into my measure, nothing's going to happen. I could play other notes, other MIDI data, sustain pedal, pitch bend. Nothing will happen until I play that specific note, and it'll start. All right, so that's another option as well. But for now, let's go back and reset this to none. All right. All right, so that is the start signal for recording options. And of course, we know the play stabs while recording option. If you have that unchecked, you won't hear the rest of your score if you have multiple instruments in there. But let's look at click and count off. So we talked a little bit about this in one of the previous videos, but the count off option here, while recording, while playing, basically means only while recording, only while playing, or always and never are your options for the count off. So theoretically, you could always hear the count off, even if you even if you're just playing back, right? And when you have always set, you'll hear the 4-beat click before, or the 8-beat click if you have two measures before the start of the score. All right, and then same with click. You could hear the click only while recording, only while playing, never hear the click, or always hear the click. So theoretically, you could actually choose always count off, but never hear the click. So you only hear the click at the beginning, and then it will go away, whether or not you're playing or recording, right? Most of the time, I think while recording are the two best options here. All right, and we started to talk about the metronome sound. Obviously, the finale click is what you're hearing currently when I go into HyperScribe, but you do have some other options, including MIDI note. And MIDI note, you're getting these new options down here for downbeats and other beats, right? So the first beat in the 4/4, and then beats 2, 3, and 4 would be these, right? And the velocity is a little bit different. You can set those the way you want. And they do give you an option for duration. And in case you're using a MIDI sound that's not a percussive sound, like if you're using a pitch or something, you might want to set the duration to be shorter than the actual value of the note. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to discern the clicks, right? So for now, it's saying the downbeats are going to be 50% of the value of the click. So if in 4/4 time, I've got it set to click quarter notes, it'll give me an 1/8 note duration and a 16th note duration on the other notes, all right? And obviously you can choose your channel 10, and the note, all right? And you can choose listen, which will allow you to play a note on your keyboard, and it will use those sounds for the click, all right? Now, in this case, by default, it will set it to channel 10 because traditionally channel 10 is the percussion channel. However, currently, I don't have anything on channel 10. In fact, if I started my HyperScribe, you wouldn't hear anything because there's nothing on channel 10. We can change that if you don't have anything on channel 10. Just go to Audio, Units, Banks, and Effect. And we're going to edit the ARIA instrument here. And you'll see I've got the Steinway piano on channel 1, but nothing anywhere else. Everything is empty, right? So we can go to channel 10 and go to the Finale default bank, and we're going to choose percussion, and let's choose woodblocks because that makes sense. All right, so now I've just loaded a sound into channel 10, and we should hear woodblocks. There they are. All right, a little nicer click sound for you if you'd prefer to hear that as opposed to the obnoxious finale click, which I actually don't mind. It's nice and piercing. All right, and then the other option here is MIDI data, and again, this starts to get a little technical with the second, third, and fourth values here. The status, data 1, data 2. It's a little bit more technical. So unless you're a MIDI programmer, you might not want to deal with this. But again, once again, you could actually just click listen and play something from your keyboard, and you'd get that as your click. All right. For now, let's go back to finale click out of here, click OK. And moving down in the HyperScribe menu in the beat source section, there's two more options here, external MIDI sync and tap. Now, external MIDI sync, this is going to be if you have an outside device, an outside piece of hardware that sends a MIDI sync signal. HyperScribe and Finale will use that signal as the beat source, as the tempo and everything, right? So theoretically, if you have an outside sequencer, you can use that to slave HyperScribe to. Now, I think this is probably more relevant, in the mid to late '90s, and even before that, when you had these hardware sequencers, right? I mean, they still have them on keyboards. You can get a keyboard with an internal sequencer. If you have that, you could, sequence on your keyboard and use that to slave to Finale for the HyperScribe. But options like that are a little bit outdated. People don't usually work like that very much anymore, but the option exists for you if you need it. All right, so that is external MIDI sync. And then finally, in the HyperScribe beat source section, let's look at tap. All right. Now, what this tap will do is will actually allow you to tap in the tempo. So instead of using, Finale as the source of the tempo for HyperScribe, it's going to use you essentially. So you can literally tap in the tempo. And there's a couple things to know about this. The top half is going to be what the source of that tap is. And you have a few options. You can choose the sustain pedal, either standard or non-standard, depending on the polarity. You can choose a MIDI note or other. If you choose other and select, this will get you that MIDI event, MIDI programmer data thing again. And of course, you can just press listen to do that. Or it's handy that they give you a little listen button, which will apply to anything. So actually, if I press listen and play a middle C, you'll see that it switches to MIDI note. If I press listen and press the sustain pedal, it'll automatically switch it to sustain pedal. If I press listen and move the pitch bend, it will choose other and whatever this code is for the pitch bend. All right. So for now, I think this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set it up so that it's the bottom C on my little 49 key keyboard. So it's MIDI note 36 on channel 1. And of course, we want to make sure that the tap beat is set up correctly, right? In this case, we want quarter notes in 4/4. And once again, please ignore the EDU value here. Just choose the rhythm, so quarter note, and click OK. And now when we go to use HyperScribe in the piano part here, nothing will happen. And remember, you won't hear the click, even though we have the Finale click set. You're not going to hear it because the click is basically you. And there is no count off in this situation either. So just start playing the click and the notes at the same time, and you're good to go. And the cool thing is that you can actually slow down or speed up, right? And it won't matter, it won't matter how fast you go, right? So this could allow you potentially to, enter notes without having to, worry about keeping a complete metronomic performance. You can actually create the metronome yourself, essentially, is what you're doing, all right? And actually, you can kind of see how pretty darn accurate that is, because, what Finale is doing is it's literally calculating the duration of the note between the clicks, right? So in the case of the eighth notes, it's exactly precise because I can play, even if I'm not in time, it's together, you know what I mean? And I'd get the same result. Actually, let me do it here. Right? I'm not in time, but it's together, so I would get an accurate performance using the tap. So it's kind of handy, right? There is one other thing in that menu. Let me just show you, because this part of it gets a little bit complicated. Go to tap again. Now we have below here something called tap states. And what this will allow you to do when you check this is it will allow you to set up alternate tap beats, essentially, with triggers to trigger that new tap beat. Now it will be handy if you have a situation like I do in the second system where it switches between 4/4, 6/8, and 4/4 again, right? Obviously, if you keep tapping quarter notes through the 6/8 section, it's going to be a little problematic when you're thinking that you're tapping dotted quarter notes, all right? So it gets a little complicated, but this is how it works if you have that checked. Just know that the very first tap state is this one. So it's going to be the quarter note setup, right? And you press select, and what you'll do is you're going to choose what the tap equals for the second state, even though it says tap state 1. This will be the second state. And press select, and in this case, I'm going to choose a dotted quarter. Click OK. And the smallest note value, this will actually allow you to change the quantization setting again. In this case, I'm going to set it to eighth notes, right? Otherwise, it takes the quantization settings that's normally set up in your HyperScribe options, all right? So I've got dotted quarter note tap equals smallest note, eighth note, and the MIDI trigger, which will allow the HyperScribe to switch to the second tap state. So I've been using the low C to actually tap, and that's not going to change, but what I am going to do is I'm going to use the C sharp right above it, and that's going to be the trigger to basically change it to this tap state, okay? And then we have two other ones. We have 1, 2, and 3, which is actually tap states 2, 3, and 4, if that makes sense. If we go to tap state 2, we can go back to the quarter note because that's the next thing in my score. Click OK. And smallest note value, we're going to set to eighth notes as well. And the MIDI trigger for this state, I'm going to do the D, right? So now, essentially what I've got is 3 tap states set up. The initial tap state, which is this one, of course, all the taps are being applied with the low C on my keyboard. And when I start, it's going to use this tap beat. When I press the C sharp, it's going to switch to the first alternate tap state, or the second tap state, and then the D is going to switch to the third, which is back to 4/4. All right, so if that's clear as mud, what I'm going to attempt to do, because this is a little bit crazy with coordination here, is I'm going to attempt to record through these sections of measures here and see what happens. So wish me luck. All right, so not too bad, but you can kind of hear what I'm doing, right? I had to make the tap, and then switch to the second tap, bump, 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 and then switch to the third tap to go back to quarter notes. It's a little bit of crazy coordination going on here, and it's one of those things where I honestly don't recommend trying this. It actually takes more practice to do it this way than to actually, just play in the notes, using speedy entry or something. It is sort of a silly option, but it is available, and that's exactly what it does. And actually, the thing is, if you have beat source set to playback and or click, and you have tempo expressions in your score that are going to change, the beat basically from 4/4 to 6/8 in this case, then it's all moot anyway, because you're going to be able to have the correct setup anyway with the click. But that is there in the tap section for you if you want. All right. So that covers all of the beat source options in HyperScribe. I hope this has been helpful, or at least enlightening. And thanks for watching, and come back and I'll do another video on some of the more advanced options in HyperScribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.